Hey, what's going on out there, YouTube family? This is Sammy Leggett here representing Team JVS. I am back here again for another TV show review. Now, this will be a non-spoiler review, but this is for season 1 of Jupiter's Legacy. Now, just to give you a quick overview of it, I'm gonna give you the synopsis reads right now. So, the synopsis is this: the first generations of superheroes are kept in the world safe and nearly for about a century. Now their children must live up to the legacy of the epic drama that spans decades and navigates the dynamics of family, power, and loyalty. Now, this was written from my man Mark Millar. I've got book 1, book 2 here. These are actually the kids. This is Sky Fox. But it's a really good read. But what did Netflix do with this property? Did they do the property justice? Again, I haven't read all of it. I only read a little bit of it so far. But I can say the world building of it, I am all the way invested into it. Now, one of the things they do, much like before it, shows like Arrow, for instance, it was 2 different shows that were happening. It's the cause and the effect. How did we get to this place, and then how are the heroes or the villains, sustain themselves within the world or the confines of the environment? And the interesting thing is that you got these heroes. You got Brainwave, Skyfox, Utopian, Lady Liberty, Blue Bolt, and somebody else, and they make up this group called the Union of Justice. And when we pick up with this, now they pretty much all have kids that also have powers as well. And, one of the main characters, his name is Brandon, who is Utopian's son. He very much so wants to not only become the next Utopian, but he wants to live up to what his dad's legacy really was, as well as he understands the gravity and the situation of trying to save the world. And the very opening, the very first episode really showcases you that from a level standpoint, that Brandon mentally is not where he needs to be. He very much so is competing with the idea of what Utopian is, as opposed to living up to some kind of legacy of his own. And you see him kind of like struggle, because in the very opening, he's kind of like fighting against somebody that, is pretty strong. But even with that, his dad had to kind of intervene. And his dad, in contrast to the very first shot where you see him talking with his kids when they're very young, to this scene right here as you're seeing it, he has a very degrading conversation with Brandon. It's very controlling. It's very putting down more so than raising up. And it's a fine line, because in his eyes, he's got a code, he's got a moral compass that nobody else can counterbalance. And he basically is this world Superman. Like, he is the first, and he also is the strongest, supposedly. Now, I think that before I even go into the story arc of this, I think the costume designs are amazing. The costumes look really freaking good. I think that the aesthetic of the costumes and the way they designed them, as well as the way they actually showcase the abilities of them, I think is really good. I think that there are some amazing shots here or there, more so the close-up shots and the hand-to-hand combat moments that are on the ground look the best. Some of the aerial shots where they're kind of flying and doing certain things, I think that those moments could be polished a little bit to look a little bit better. I'm not sure if it's more of a budget thing or it's more so like setting up for something else, but there was a specific fight scene in the first episode that is really rough. This is a very violent show. Like, it's gory. As a matter of fact, it's actually very raunchy. Like, there's sexual encounters, there's violence, there's drugs, there's alcohol, there's gore, and then there is some maliciously evil things that are at work. But one of the things that work to the core of this, again, I talked about, the visual aesthetic, but I think more so than anything, the human side of showing who these characters really are, which brings me to the character like Chloe. Chloe is also Utopian's daughter. And in contrast, much like kind of like Brandon, he has a conversation with her in the beginning. She seems like the one that's poised to be the future hero kind of thing. And when we see her in present day, she's not that. Like, she is very much so the opposite of that. Like, she is a model and she has her own agenda. She has her own thoughts, and she very much so does not want to be a part of the family business, even though she has her own core strengths. And you start to break down much what Superman and Lois is doing right now from a foundational standpoint, which is showing the idea of, okay, you have a man that has unfathomable ability and capability, and he inspires other heroes to do the same. But what does that mean for your family? What happens to your family when you become something bigger than you can even really understand? And I think that this is where that aspect of this, where Mark Millar really shines in terms of the way that the character progression goes, because every single character, big or small, do have importance and poignancy to the storyline, where I kind of was like, oh, I don't know, like, do I really care about this? And I'm like, oh, okay. So Utopian, even though he's all high and vigor, he is very much so Sheldon Sampson. What was Sheldon Sampson? Why is he the way that he is now versus the way that he is before? And a lot of it comes from a lot of generational issues, a lot of generational hurts and pains. The interesting part about the two different storylines is I'm honestly more invested in seeing the progression of them getting to be the, without spoiling anything, the Union of Justice, because that progression of how they get powers, why they get powers, what happens to them as a people is way more intriguing than almost the present day stuff. Even though the present day things that are happening are laying some foundational things from what happened in the past. So it's not as though the present day things aren't important, but the conversations and the reasons why people are the way they are what makes me very intrigued to see a second season of this. I'm gonna be very honest with you. I want to see a second season. I need to know how these individuals right here become world's saviors, essentially, and why. Because each one of these characters, they show you their fundamental flaws. Even, some of the ones that are kind of questionable, characters that are in present day, like, why does this character do this? What would bring them to this point? The show shows you, for good or bad, like, they show you the worst and the best of humanity. And honestly, I think you see more of the worst than you do actually see the best, because anybody that, to me, kind of shows like, they're not in a gray area, but they're kind of like, okay, this is what's right. I'm going to do what's right. This is how I feel. I'm going to stick to this. Again, I talked about a code, and Utopian believes that the heroes shouldn't kill, no matter what. Like, and they go into very specifics about, well, soldiers, in the military, like, they have to bear arms according to the acts of war and the circumstances around them and their environment. But from Utopian or Sheldon's perspective, they can't cross that line. Much like you would think of like Superman, or you would think of like Batman, but they take that and they flip it in a way that you kind of question, like, whose ideal is that? What was the real intimate personal perspective behind it? Is it justified? Is it right? Is it going to be something that's going to escalate into something worse or something better? And I think that they continuously balance that very well throughout the film. There's another character that I really love, because he kind of is like more of a, I don't want to even call him a hero. He's more of an anti-hero slash villain, but Hutch, this character right here, I love this character. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I think that he is so interesting, and his connection with Utopian and the Union is so intriguing to me that I am all the way here for what his backstory is. They do very interesting things to make you engaged and make you kind of like, oh, okay, wait, what? How did we get here, and why is this happening right now? Down to again, there are two different story arcs that are going on. The present day thing is right now is where you have the youth that are trying to figure out what this means to be, the future saviors of the world, but the world is in a state of present day, whereas the past takes place in the 1920s. Now you ask yourself, how in the world are they still alive? I'm not going to answer that. You got to watch the show or read the comics accordingly, or the graphic novels accordingly. It'll go into those details, but there is something interesting that happens there where people's ideals and their perspective of how life should be, of course, is going to change as the world revolves around their circumstance. No matter how strong you are, there's always going to be something you have to deal with. And in present day, they're dealing with the breakdown of that ideal and that code and what that meant or what that means for the future of everybody. Another interesting character I found was amazing was Brainwave. Brainwave is so interesting to me, Walter. I think that he might be the most interesting character. He might be my favorite character, even though he's dealing with the most emotional turmoil given the circumstances that happen. Because I really haven't spoiled anything for you guys. There's way too much for me to even try to cover. I should have gone through and gone every single episode to try to do that, because these characters go through it, past and present. Where it's like, if you're thinking about like Chloe and her perspective of her dad and their reality and his need to control, or if you're talking about Walter and what he went through in the past and what their father had to deal with and what their father put them through, and as well as what Sheldon's shortcomings brought him to, it is very intriguing, and it allows you to kind of see, where is this going? And what is the right answer? Is there a right answer? Can we figure this out on our own? Should we be the ones to make that decision on our own? Or should it be not just a vote, but should we look to each other to kind of figure it out? And I think that they play with that idea a lot in this show. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it isn't going to be something that is a clear-cut answer. It's not as easy as you kill someone and that's it, or you save someone, that's it. No, there are true consequences to both of those questions, and I think this show does allow that to work in spades. And I think it, from the aesthetic, like I said, from visual aesthetic, I think they get the costume designs perfect. From the way that I've read it so far, I think that the tone, it definitely has a lot that it can go down that road. And I think that it could be something very special / dark / sinister. And I think that if they take something, I hate to compare this, if they take From the Boys and just go for it, I think that Netflix has a winner on their hands. And it would also inspire like other, Mark Millar stories like Superior or Nemesis. Like, those are very hardcore characters and hardcore stories as well, which I would personally would like to see, given they were able to kind of, put their foot into this one. The only thing that kind of holds this back to me is that there's a lot of story, there's a lot of pacing, a lot of intriguing characters. Like the character George, I find him very intriguing. I look at George and I'm like, bro, you kind of remind me of a mixed up version of Bruce Wayne in so many different levels. But they play him very specifically. And those moments are important, I think, from a narrative standpoint. But I repeat, do not expect this to be every single episode. It's going to be fight, gory. There's not a lot of that necessarily. It's sprinkled throughout. It is focusing more on building you to the world that is this circumstance. And I think by the end of the season, where it ends at, past and present, you're going to be way more invested in the second season than you even were in the first season. Because I think that the first season had to give you a foundation on where this is going, how we got here. and why we're here and what does this mean and what are the ramifications behind it. And again, some of those key characters I told you guys about that I found so interesting play a heavy foot into the way that this story is going to go. And I think that you're definitely going to enjoy it. I would rest this at 7.5, 8 out of 10. The only reason why I rested maybe a 7.5 is again, it's not like The Boys in the sense that I feel like some moments I feel like they're going for it, and then sometimes I feel like they kind of pulling back. Then there's moments where it kind of like breaking, code without me saying too much, where it's like, wait, I thought this person is way more stronger than this. Oh, I thought is this person holding back? Like, what's really happening? Like, you question that, and you're kind of waiting for the payoff or the punchline, to kind of just like, stick it to you. And it doesn't. One of the things I love about The Boys season 1 and season 2, they don't care. Like, they will punch you in the gut and you just feel it and you just have to deal with it. In this show, there are moments that do punch you in the gut, but then there are moments that it just doesn't go anywhere necessarily just yet. And that's why I said that the stuff that's happening in the past is so intriguing to me from a mental and emotional level, just bringing these past heroes to where they are in present day. And I am so there for that. Like, that could be its own, to me, depending on how they plan this out, they could make that as its own series just separately. Like, but I'll leave it at that. And you kind of ask yourself, what does Jupiter's legacy even mean? You will find out. I think it's worth the watch. It's only 8 episodes, and I think that you'll enjoy the ride. Again, some of the fights from an aerial standpoint kind of looked a little cheesy. Certain moments kind of like were a little unnecessary to me. But it does have that comic book feel to it. It does have that flair to it, and definitely does have that edge to it that I think is very essential for right now. But I'll talk to you guys a bit later on. Hopefully you guys enjoy this review. Keep it locked. JVS, we ain't gonna stop. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit that bell button. Peace, guys.